Welcome to part 2 of our 2-part series detailing one of the realities of owning a boat. There's always something to fix, even if it's a brand new boat. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure to check it out in the link above. In part 1, we detailed some of the fixes that we made getting our boat handed over to us, and also while we were going up on that first big sail up to the Chesapeake. And in part 2, we're going to talk about some of the fixes that we made while we were in the Chesapeake, and also additional fixes that we found and made while we were going down the East Coast.
Beyond the beautifulness of the places that you get to go and the quiet, restful afternoons of sitting here on the back of your aft cockpit and looking like it's just all easy, it's not always all easy. We will talk about the dauntingness of boat ownership. It doesn't come in smooth, progressive amounts. It'll be easy, and then you'll kind of shoot up, and then you'll come back down. There are challenges, and it's just not, I can take care of those type of challenges. No, it's, do you have the fortitude of continuing sailing when they all pile up, and you're going to have to dig yourself out, and then go back to having a really enjoyable time.
Meet Lab Mariner, our home on the water, and her crew. Anubis, the huntress. Jim, the captain. Mocha, the camera dog. Nuala, the greeter. And Stephanie, the cruise director. Problems we found in the Chesapeake.
In the beginning of the handover, majority of the issues are going to be imperfections. Over time, 6 months, a year, it starts going from imperfections of production to basically just standard wear and tear items. As an example, when you get your boat, it's completely waxed. All the chrome is sparkling. All the lines are nice and neat and clean and haven't kinked up at all. You just have the most perfect, beautiful vessel there is. And within 6 months, your lines are going to start to be kinked. You're going to have salt on everything because you're out in the ocean. It goes from pointing the fingers at maybe some of the quality issues that we've come across with production, and that's not a complaint. And this is not because it's a catamaran or a monohull. It's not because of the specific manufacturer. It is an issue within the complete sailing community. It's the nature of the beast. For us, being up in the Chesapeake, we weren't going to use the boat over the winter, and it made more sense for us at the time to actually dry dock the boat. So we actually pulled the boat out of the water and dry docked it. We brought it back into the water in the spring. The third period for which we had to do maintenance and fix items on the vessel was post dry docking of our boat. We had a long list of things that needed to be fixed, and that was finding who could fix them, where did we need to take our boat to get it fixed, were they available to fix it, what cost it was going to be to fix it, and you couldn't get all your fixes done at one place easily. And in many cases, you're trying to keep your vessel at a marina, but where the work needs to happen is in more of a boatyard, and not every marina has a boatyard, and not every boatyard has a marina, and so you have to coordinate all that. On top of us owning a brand new boat and wanting to use it, we also had oil changes because there was break-in periods for a lot of the equipment. The break-in period of our generator had been reached, so we needed to change all our fluids. Both of our diesel engines needed to be maintained and kept up to spec for our warranties, and that was just the beginning. By the end of the first full season, we had gone to 2 different marinas and had them do some larger fixes.
Problem number 1, refrigerator in the salon.
The freezer and the bottom drawer refrigerator, this one unit has had a number of operating issues that all the owners report. The first one that everybody started reporting was at the very back of this refrigerator, there's a tube that comes through in the back of the fridge freezer unit, and the tube was dangling out and was not in there. And when you follow the tube to the other end, it was basically ending in the bilge. So it looked like there was water that was supposed to go through that tube and empty into the bilge every once in a while. I took this freezer drawer out, and you could easily see where the tube came through, and there was a tray right underneath the freezer which had a nipple that the tube was supposed to attach to. The issue is that the nipple is very, very short, and you can attach the tube to it, but within a few minutes, the elasticity of the tube squeezes back down and it just pops off. I was able to rig pressure to keep the tube forced against the nipple in a way that the tube hasn't come off the nipple that collects the water from defrosting the freezer. So I found a way to fix it. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was just a real hassle because if you didn't have that tube there, when you defrosted the freezer, all the water would just come raining down on all of your refrigeration products. So I fixed the tube thinking that was good. And the first time I went to defrost, I still had a huge amount of water in the refrigerator and very little water was down in the bilge. So obviously something else wasn't working. And it happened to be at the same time another owner had the same issue, and she took apart the drawers, found that the tray was actually angled the wrong way. You'd expect with all dripping of all the melting frost to go into the tray, go to the back of the tray where the hole is, and it goes into the hole and down the tube and gets out of there. And unfortunately, how it went in is that the tray was actually tilted forward. And so it would collect all the water, but water wouldn't go uphill to the drain spout. It would actually, again, just go forward and pour into the fridge. So this is the freezer, and the drip tray is literally right under here between the freezer and the refrigerator. We then went back and shimmed the drip tray between the refrigerator and the freezer in a fashion that the water now leads directly to the drain pipe, and lo and behold, it works now perfectly as a collection tray. The water is going to go to the back of the tray, it's going to go right through the nipple into the tube, and all the water is going to collect down in our bilge. You can easily clean it out at that location, and it's a much easier way to defrost the freezer. And we have one other issue, and that is, in order for the refrigerator to be cold, it basically has an insulated pad in between here, so that when the freezer is running, part of the freezer will take some of the heat out of the fridge. Right here you can set the temperature of the freezer, and depending on how cold you make the freezer, you could freeze your eggs and your cheese and other things in your refrigerator just because we're not monitoring it. So that fixed, we bought a Bluetooth temperature gauge, and what we've done is we basically have one of those units right here, and we keep it near the top of the fridge. Every 2 or 3 days when I go into this control panel, I happen to look, and right now it's 39 degrees, which is a pretty good temperature for the fridge. And I am glad to report that the freezer is always frozen. No matter what temperature we choose on the freezer, it's just freezing all the time. It's just picking the right level of the compressor, turning on and off in order for the fridge to meet that not too hot, not too cold level.
Problem number 2, ceiling panels in berths falling down. Take a look at the ceiling panels in the starboard and port berths. Can you tell the difference?
After going up to the Chesapeake, we found on the port side forward berth and aft berth, this one panel would keep falling down because the Velcro underneath was not doing its job. So we removed it. Our solution for our panels in the main salon, where we don't have any of these caps, we're very, very happy with, but not very many people have that type of aftermarket solution. It's very time consuming, expensive, and very difficult to do. This is much, much faster and easier. We elected to actually use this simpler solution here. One, because there isn't as much bulkheads above this panel that we can put a lot of Velcro tape on. Number 2, it's not within eye shot. When you're walking into the berths, this panel is off to the side, and it's not something that catches your eye at all. And the wiring is not necessarily something we need to get to very often. If need be, we're going to have to pop all these caps off the screws and then take all of these 8 screws off, and the panel will come down and we can work on the wiring. These caps house the tops of some Phillip head screws, and all you do is just drill the screw up into the bulkhead, and then once it's put in, you snap these white caps down on the anchoring, and they make this nice, clear, smooth, finished look without having to see screw heads everywhere. The caps you can find at any hardware store. Both Lowe's and Home Depot have them. These little button tops with these screws going right into the bulkheads have been an awesome solution for us, both fore and aft starboard cabins.
Problem number 3, refrigerator in cockpit rusting.
At delivery of our vessel, those of us who ordered a aft cockpit refrigerator, this right here, we all had it delivered with a door that did not match the Salon freezer fridge. In fact, I think it was probably the manufacturer's version for an RV or a camper. The most notable thing was shortly thereafter receiving it, it just started rusting all over. It was not a stainless steel door. Leopard realized they had a problem and they mailed us all the door and trim pieces.
So what did we get in these two big boxes behind us? We got a replacement refrigerator door. This is our old refrigerator door. And as you can see, it's starting to rust. It was actually made of steel. Our new refrigerator door is a stainless steel, so we should not be seeing any rust on it. So you're removing the cockpit fridge entirely, putting it on the floor. There it goes. You're removing the outer mounting frame. Look at all that corrosion. Wow. Screwed it through. Remove plastic brackets. After thoroughly cleaning with either a blade or a cleaner, this is what it looked like, with all the Sika removed.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Pretty good. Rest new stainless steel door on existing lower door hinge pin and fasten new stainless steel upper door hinge bracket to top of fridge.
I'm also making sure that the metal to the metal seems to be square. We just did the hinge. Now we're going to put on the latch plate, which is this. And then we put on the
upper door rail. So you use new upper rail holes as a template to mark where to drill holes.
Yes, I know that.
So you actually have to drill some new holes.
Yes. This is the latch plate. That's the latch. When you close the door, it's supposed to line up here. The directions say that there needs to be 40 millimeters between the fascia of the refrigerator and the edge of this. So I am measuring 40 millimeters.
Your surface is nice and flat.
Yeah, it was rocking too much. Let's see. Expand enough to line up with that hole.
The bottom ones too. Peel off all the tape.
We ended up having this product once all the owners did all the work to put these doors on, but in the end it does look like the product that we had in the salon, and we're very happy with it. It looks quite good.
Problem number 4, second clutch broken. So one of the reasons we went to Cape Charles, other than to see Cape Charles, was we had 3 clutches that needed to be changed out. We had 2 clutches that were damaged. This is the first one that was damaged. It actually blew out. As you'll see here, it's totally unusable. This actually happened on our trip up from Dania Beach when we picked up the boat, so it was very early on. So we've been working with this damaged clutch for quite some time now. And let me show you on the new clutch what we were working with. So this is our reef line. This is the halyard for the second head sail, and this is the port sheet for the first head sail. So once we started using our second head sail, what we actually had to do was we had to pull out one of the reefing lines and push in the line for the second head sail. So then if we had to use the reefing lines, we would have to switch it off again. So it was really a pain. The second clutch that broke out was the clutch for our main sheets. This one actually, you'll see, it would not close properly. Sometimes we could get it to close, other times this piece would lift and we couldn't actually get it to close. So we'd actually have to have it on one of the winches to keep the line from going loose. So since we had 2 clutches that needed to be replaced, we figured let's just go ahead and get all 3 of them replaced. And we found these spin lock clutches. And one thing interesting about these clutches compared to the Lumar clutches is that the Lumar clutches actually open forward, whereas the spin lock clutches open backwards. So I think it's going to take us a little bit of time to get used to that, but it should come pretty easily. Problem number 5, stanchion rusting.
We started getting a rust issue with some of our safety line stanchion poles, and it was noted by a number of other owners on the Facebook page what the problem was and what the ultimate solution was. So basically, these stanchion poles along the port and starboard sides of the vessel, this base right here is attached to the hull, and this stanchion drops into it and is held by a screw here. What we all realized was there's supposed to be a weep hole. When it rains, the water runs down, goes along this tubing and then into the base part, and it'll fill up with water. The water, when it would rain, would go in and start filling up the cavity inside the base. We would end up getting a lot of rusting in the base, and then the rust would come out through the connection here and then dribble down the side of the vessel. One of the owners found that there is a weep hole right here on each of the bases, but you need to drill through this stanchion pole so that the water that collects inside here can actually drain out. Stainless is very, very hard to drill through. I'd probably go through 2 to 3 cheap metal drill bits to get through each one of these stanchion poles. But once you got through each one of these little weep holes, then you'd get this long drool down the boat, but all that rusty water would get out, and then once the hole is there, it allowed enough air penetration to keep the cavity, for the most part, fairly dry and far less rust, and we were very happy with the solution of that too.
Problem number 6, winches.
The next issue is this fiberglass right here, which is where the winches are mounted to. The thickness and the strength of this, it's never failed, but when you put a huge amount of pressure on the winch, so this is the main halyard, it raises and lowers the mainsail. It probably has the most pressure, but when you would tighten this up and raise the main, you would literally see this winch start to move forward slightly, and the fiberglass here would actually bend. And the issue is that this winch is completely attached to this fiberglass area, and this whole fiberglass area is part of this massive amount of fiberglass. It's all one unit. The thickness of this area was supposedly the right thickness so that there was enough rigidity to hold this winch, as all this lateral pressure is being applied raising the main or using any of these other lines. But as you increase the pressure on these lines, you could actually see the winch actually deflecting, literally moving slightly forward, and this fiberglass right here actually puckering just a little bit, bending forward. And when you got to the very top of the mast and you were putting the most pressure on, you could see this really deflect considerably. The manufacturer issued a standard process to beef up the base here underneath the winch. So we had Boatyard remove both of these winches, went underneath here and put these big donuts of material, fiberglassed it and glued it all in up into here, and basically allowed the bolts of these winches to go through the current fiberglass and then through these big donuts that was basically, it's like a giant backing to this that spread the load much further out all the way around the winch, and they glued it and fiberglassed it in, and then put longer bolts back in because it was now thicker, and put the winches back on. And now anytime we raise or lower anything around here, we see zero deflection, and it is absolutely working perfectly.
Problems we found sailing down the East Coast.
So after our summer season of sailing in the Chesapeake, we dry docked our boat for a week out of the 4 weeks we were working our vessel, getting ready to go down the East Coast. We had a number of items that, as we were sailing down the East Coast, needed to be addressed. So we were having things fixed or added and repaired all the way down the East Coast. And it had to all be done before we came here to the Bahamas, because the Bahamas literally has very, very little maintenance of any type. We have an issue with an electronics component from one of the top 2 or 3 vendors in the world. And there is only one place in all of the Bahamas. It's about 200 to 300 nautical miles from here. And there is no guarantee that they even have the components. They would have to be flown in, go through customs, and then delivered. So if you're not completely ready and have things ready to repair yourself on your own here in the Bahamas, you're pretty much going to be left out of luck here.
Problem number 1, Skylight delaminating. Our first stop down the East Coast was at Cape Lookout, North Carolina, where we discovered that our Skylight was delaminating. We make an appointment at a boatyard in Wilmington, North Carolina, our next destination, to fix our Skylight. But that's a 185 nautical mile sail from Cape Lookout. So we decide to strap our Skylight down with ropes using a fender to avoid damaging the acrylic.
The problem with the delamination was the primer didn't adhere to the acrylic correctly, and so when the primer peeled off in the sunlight, then obviously all the glue wasn't there to hold on, and then as you saw from the earlier pictures, when we lifted it up, it was quite an exciting discovery.
What was the standard operating procedure as far as what you know about it?
They removed the entire window, scraped all the original primer off, and went to the frame of the window, scraped all the glue and primer that was on that side of it, and then they scuffed it up only in the area that was going to accept the primer. Put the primer on, let that dry and cure, and then used Sikaflex, and they put that glue all the way around the frame. Then picked up the acrylic glass, placed it down, and allowed the properly laid primer to go against the new glue. They put an extra 200 pounds of materials on top of the window, which was enough to squish the glue in between the acrylic glass and the frame. Let it cure for about 36 hours. You remove the weights, you let it cure for another 4 or 5 days without moving it around, and as a result, we now have a firmly fastened window. And for right now, this is just extremely strong, and we have every confidence that this is a one and done situation.
Problem number 2, Mainsail Halyard chafing.
Another maintenance issue that pops up all the time for any sailor is chafe. Chafe isn't a question of never having it, it's just preventing it as long as you possibly can. This is a small example of chafe. You can see how the line is starting to fray. And when the line starts to fray, it gets weaker, and you want to fix that fray long before it gets to a point where it becomes a safety issue. One of the biggest ones that we've had to deal with is our halyard. Our halyard basically goes from here up to the top of the mast. When the sail is in the sail bag, the halyard comes all the way down, goes through a pulley at the top of the sail in the sail bag, and then goes all the way back up to the top of the mast. And when you lift it, it's basically a pulley system that allows this really heavy sail to go up. But at the very top of the mast, where they had tied a bowline at the end of the line, right next to it is a topping lift line which holds up our boom. The topping lift is at an angle, and the halyard goes beside it, and under certain conditions, the topping lift and the halyard will actually rub up to one another. We looked up at the very top with binoculars, and you could see the halyard was starting to fray. To have the bitter end of the line at the very top of that mast break and have the main come crashing down unexpectedly would have been a very difficult situation potentially. So what that required us to do was to get out our bowsman chair. Stephanie went to the top of our mast, cut that bowline out, and dropped the halyard line down to me. I was able to cut that segment out of the halyard, reseal the end of the line, and then hoist it back up to her so that she could then take the end of the halyard and upside down at 70 feet, tie a bowline, and have our halyard working properly again. And she was able to do that.
Problem number 3, topping lift chafing.
Our topping line chafed through when it came in contact with one of our sail battens under a night sail that we had no idea that it was even in contact with our batten. And the next morning of that long night sail, our topping line had completely frayed through. Lucky to us that it was not a difficult situation. It was a hassle, but that line also had to be removed and replaced. While Stephanie was up managing the halyard issue, what we were able to do is have a replacement line. And so she actually was able to drop down the fraying end that was about 40 feet up in the air, just dangling there. And she was able to drop it to me. I was able to sew the end of the new line to the tattered line so that it was all attached like this. And then we were able to hold the old line through the sail, all the way through the mast, all the way down, and then pull the new line through with it. And we were able to basically exchange the old frayed line with the brand new line and then just retie it off at the two ends, and it was fine.